Wow, so this crazy situation took place at a McDonald's restaurant in Riverdale, Maryland. And before we play the rest of this crazy video, we need to talk. The Taser is an amazing tool. In fact, its incredible effectiveness is precisely the reason that over the last few years there has been this trend of what we call over-reliance on the device. Now, this over-reliance is a problem for two main reasons. Number one, officers are deploying their tasers for any reason under the sun, even when the taser isn't necessary. Now, the risk is that when someone is hit with the taser, their whole body locks up. This is called neuromuscular incapacitation, or NMI. This is why when anyone is getting tased in a controlled training setting, at least two people are holding their arms ready to catch them and prevent them from falling down and banging their head. In real life, there is no one there to catch you. So when you get tased, you're going to fall, and when you do, there is a likelihood of injury. And the bottom line is, most altercations can be managed with simple verbal de-escalation techniques and basic hands-on control tactics, also known as defensive tactics. The second problem with this over-reliance is that it's causing officers to neglect hands-on training. And as a result, when the taser doesn't have the desired outcome, the officer panics and doesn't have the hands-on techniques to control the suspect. This triggers a rapid escalation of force, and the arrest turns into a much bigger ordeal than is necessary. This is bad for the officer, this is bad for the suspect, and it's very bad for the department's relationship with the community. Now let's get back to the video. So that loud pop, that is the officer deploying the taser. The two prongs essentially connect to the suspect, and the loud kind of electrical current that you're hearing, that's the charge running from the taser into the prongs. The problem is, it's not having the desired outcome. There's no neuromuscular incapacitation. The suspect is still standing, obviously in discomfort, but he's still upright. And at that point, the officer realizes the taser is not having the desired effect. Probably because the prongs are too close together, so it's not giving the spread necessary for maximum effectiveness. At this point, the officer whips out his collapsible steel baton, approaches the suspect, continues telling him to lay down. You can still hear the current. He's holding the trigger, continuing to run this, what's typically a 5-second, charge to the suspect, is just continuous on cycle there. He uses the baton, hits him in the leg, in the hip area, hits him again in the leg here. The suspect is not having it. He's not aggressing towards the officer, but he's, defensively resistant, right? He's not complying here. And now you'll see the officer continue to run the charge, but it's not having the effect that he wants. So at this point, he's looking for other options. The officer backs over into the corner near the door, and then the cover officer, the secondary officer, comes in and blindsides him here. Boom. Which, is a good move in an attempt to kind of go hands-on and control the suspect. The problem is he can't control him. Look. He gets right back up, turns, runs. Officers are striking him. He's not striking back. The cover officer, look at this, boom, blindside tackle. A good idea to engage. The problem is if you can't control the person once they hit the ground, it doesn't do you any good. Keep in mind, the suspect has socks on. He's wearing socks on a slippery, clean McDonald's floor. And he's able to get right back up. It just shows that there's absolutely no body control, tactics training, or methods employed here. Not to mention the uncoordinated efforts of the two officers. They're not really collaborating in their apprehension of the suspect here. So they strike from both sides, and it creates somewhat of a chaotic situation. Then the secondary officer here deploys their taser. Boom. And then they kind of push him outdoors. They go out. The camera will change angles over here. And now we see that the suspect has fallen down near the curb and is obviously, in pain here. We still don't know what degree the effectiveness of the taser versus the rest of the situation. But in either case, you have one officer there with the taser deployed, the wires connected, the prongs attached to the suspect, and now the cover officer comes in, looks to kind of finish the arrest. But watch what happens. The suspect just sits up. The suspect literally just sat up. He didn't swing, he didn't rip his arm away, he didn't do anything. He just sits up in a chair, and when he sits up, the officer has such limited ground control, familiarity, and arresting and controlling procedure from here that he has no ability to control someone who just sits up. And that, to me, is the strongest indicator that, the training that's being provided to these officers is absolutely ineffective in terms of going hands-on and controlling the suspect. So here you see the officer who has the taser deployed As the suspect tries to get up, he's going to use what we call a drive stun right there. A drive stun where you basically jam the taser into their body, direct contact, and it, you know, has a similar effect. The problem is, again, because you don't have the spread, it's not having the neuromuscular incapacitation effect that we're looking for. So a couple strikes from here, taser still deployed. He's not listening. At this point, the officers realize that the taser's not going to work and they're outdoors, so he deploys the OC spray, which is kind of the, you know, pepper spray, so to speak. Sprays this stuff. It affects him internally, his breathing, his respiratory, his vision. Everything's affected. You see him start to stumble around. So it's having an effect on him. But again, this is just part of the battle here. You know, the bad guy's not going to handcuff himself, and that's the biggest challenge here. So he's still stumbling around. Another taser cartridge deployed. That puts him down. Has a little more of a spread and a more immediate impact than it did indoors, which is great. But once again, we still have to close the deal. Several seconds passed there. I just cut the footage out because nothing was happening. Now you have 3 officers, and they're still kind of debating how they're going to control this guy. Even though he's not fighting back, they just don't have a plan to basically go hands-on and complete the arrest. So he drags him by his arm here. Very uncoordinated effort between the officers. Tases him again. Can't tell if it was an additional cartridge or he just sent the charge through the existing cartridge. But man, you can tell the guy's incredibly uncomfortable. He's not complying. But again, you know, the amount of effort taken to simply put this guy in handcuffs, pulling his arm, no hip control, no lower body control. You can see here they apply the cuff on one hand. And after some discussion and figuring out, man, it's just, yeah, it's so much effort. Look at this. And people watching this in McDonald's, and that's a huge part of the entire thing. You know, you hear people saying, why don't they just put handcuffs? Why don't they just, you know, handcuff him? Why don't they just arrest him? Well, they're trying. That's the whole point. But without training, it's not as easy as it looks. Bending his arm every which way here. And finally, it looks so uncomfortable. They were able to, you know, get the guy here and apply the cuffs. So the real question is, you know, you look at a situation like this and man, all that just to put a man who, you know, probably weighs no more than 160 pounds, wearing socks, no t-shirt, obviously on drugs or, you know, has a mental condition or both, and all of that effort just to put the non-violent man in handcuffs. And the question really is there a better way? Now, thank God there were multiple officers there responding to this incident, and this guy was not actively aggressive towards the officers at any point during the incident because I'm pretty confident, based on their obvious lack of confidence in hands-on training, if it was a one-on-one situation and this guy became aggressive towards any one of those officers, one would infer that they would have had no choice but to escalate to deadly force. And yeah, we're just so lucky, even though this is a very unfortunate incident, it could have been much, much worse. Now, another thing to consider is the officer ratio. It took 3 officers to control one suspect who was not aggressive, had no shoes on, weighed no more than 150 pounds, and was on drugs or mentally ill. With the limited training they're receiving, imagine how many of these officers it would take to control someone who had shoes on, weighed 200 pounds or more, was not on drugs, and was aggressive toward the officers. I mean, it would take a dozen cops or more. Now, what's crazy is that it's not even their fault. The officers in this video, it's not their fault. They don't choose the training they receive. Someone wearing a suit behind a desk at their police headquarters is calling all the shots. But these officers and the people in their community are the ones who pay the price ultimately for the lack of training they receive. Now, I'm all for tasers, OC spray, batons, and other tools. When used appropriately and they work, they can save lives. The problem is that when a person or an entire police department becomes over-reliant on their tools, their emphasis on hands-on training or defensive tactics goes down. And when their hands-on proficiency decreases, their fear of going hands-on with the suspect increases. And as the fear of going hands-on goes up, so does the likelihood of deadly force. At the Gracie Academy, we call this the over-reliance effect. This was certainly the case in the 2013 incident where a Kansas City police officer
fatally shot a drunk off-duty firefighter when they got into a physical altercation and fell to the ground, but the officer didn't have the hands-on training to manage the situation, so he had no choice but to resort to deadly force.
And the sad part is, when a police officer arrests someone humanely and effectively, it gets no publicity. It's the growing number of excessive force and deadly force incidences that go viral overnight and ultimately ruin a department's relationship with the community they serve. You get one Michael Brown incident and the city goes up in flames, and the damaged property wasn't even the worst part. It's the community relations that will take generations to repair.
So what's the solution? Well, there's only one: better training. By providing officers with easy-to-learn, highly effective defensive tactics training, you immediately increase their hands-on proficiency. And this hands-on proficiency instantly boosts the officer's confidence and overall officer presence. It's this newfound confidence that drastically reduces the officer's fear of going hands-on with the suspect. And to the same degree that you can reduce the officer's fear, you will also reduce the likelihood of that officer resorting to deadly force prematurely. We call this the Gracie effect, and it's what happens when an officer completes our defensive tactics program, Gracie Survival Tactics.
Now, when people think of the Gracies teaching law enforcement, they think that we're teaching crazy jujitsu, submission, sport, reversals, techniques that take years to master and would never have any applicability in a real fight. And that could not be further from the truth. Even though those techniques exist in jujitsu, over the last 20 years that we've been teaching law enforcement, we've realized that what we teach has to be simple, effective, and must end with the suspect in handcuffs. We don't encourage the officers to get into ground fights. We teach them how to manage the damage and retain control of their weapons when the ground fight happens against their will, and how to get out of the ground fight as quickly as possible to resort to their other force options like the taser when the situation calls for it. The bottom line is, an officer without sound defensive tactics training is an accident waiting to happen. When tools and technology fail, all you have is your training and your hands-on techniques. But it doesn't matter how badly the end users, basically the street cops, want these techniques. Unless a decision maker at the department takes action and sends some instructors to get certified by us, it won't happen. We teach these 5-day GST instructor certification courses almost every month at different police academies around the country. In fact, next month I'll be at the top secret Navy SEAL compound in Coronado, California for a 5-day level 1 GST instructor course. If you're on the fence about doing this program, you need to get off the fence and meet me in San Diego. It's the second year in the row that the Navy SEALs have hosted us, and it's a very rare opportunity since they do not often open their doors for outside agencies or organizations for obvious reasons. But it's a blast, and it's a perfect time to get on the Gracie train if you've been thinking about it. If you can't make it to San Diego, we have all the dates and locations on our website, graciesurvivaltactics.com. And what's crazy is that in every single GST course that we teach, approximately half of the participants are what we call pioneers from their departments, meaning they are the first group of individuals from a particular department to ever be certified on behalf of that department. The other half of the participants are basically people who are return individuals from departments that have already kind of jumped on board, are on the Gracie train as we call it, and they're sending more instructors from a Gracie certified department. They're sending more instructors to get certified by us. So what's crazy is that every single course we teach, about half of the people are representative of departments who've never done GST and are coming on board for the first time. That's been happening for the last 20 years. Every single year, every single course, every single one, there are people who are jumping on board for the first time. And the question is, if your department has not yet sent an instructor to participate in this course, what the heck are we waiting for? When and what's going to have to happen at your department in order for you guys to send some guys over and make it happen? I don't know what that is, but the bottom line is, to reduce the frequency of unnecessary deadly force incidences, every officer needs this training. Along those lines, I want to invite the 3 officers that we saw in this video from Riverdale, Maryland, to participate in the 5-day GST instructor certification course for free. So anyone who knows those officers that were in the video, connect them to the Gracie Academy. We want to sponsor them, bring them out to California, and make it happen. For the rest of you guys, talk to the decision makers at your department and find your way to San Diego next month. Meet me there. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. If it's not the best DT course you've ever done in your life, let me know at the end and you'll get 100% money back, no problem.
But don't take my word for it. We've certified over 5,000 instructors in the last 20 years who represent virtually every federal and state law enforcement agency, not to mention the countless local departments. And we've collected tons of written and video testimonials on our website. And once you see what these graduates have to say regarding the program effectiveness and the reduction of excessive force allegations in their departments, it'll be a no-brainer. It's time, you guys. Get off the fence, get on the train, and get the hands-on proficiency you need to protect and serve in the most humane way possible. I'll see you on the mat.